Let's go back to Michael Hart. Thank you so much for joining us on this very historic day for Kenosha, for anyone impacted by this case. Could you just talk about your reaction to 5 non-guilty verdicts for Kyle Rittenhouse?
Look, it was a tall order for the state. Once the issue of self-defense was raised by the defense, the government had to disprove beyond a reasonable doubt that he didn't act in self-defense, and that proved at the end of the day to be too much. I will say this, I would say that the fact that there was the video of the shooting, what we don't see in most homicide cases, probably saved Kyle Rittenhouse's life.
And that really has been the key, I think, for both sides. We were just discussing that. So many different pieces of video, so many different angles to draw on there. Do you think there was any one in particular that really could have swayed the jury, one that gave them kind of their lead, their marching orders on what would eventually be 5 not guilty verdicts?
Well, you know, the image of Huber and the others attacking him with a skateboard, the fella flying at him to kick him in the head, right? That's pretty compelling stuff. Yeah, it all contributed, and the fact that he responded the way he did at the end of the day proved to be too much for the government to overcome in terms of the self-defense argument.
The not guilty verdicts, Kyle Rittenhouse now released from bond. How does Kyle Rittenhouse assimilate himself back into, the real world, essentially, with these non-guilty verdicts?
Well, that's a fair question. I mean, Rittenhouse is a name probably not much different from Lewinsky. He's going to have to, live. People know who Kyle Rittenhouse is around the country and, for that matter, around the world. He'll be saddled with that, and assimilating back into the community will be a challenge. But life goes on, and hopefully he learned from the experience. It will guide him going forward in the choices and decisions he makes. Maybe he's emboldened. I don't know, but this is the first day of the rest of his life.
We're sort of processing this all in the moment, and we'll be able to take a look back and evaluate things over the coming hours and days and weeks, I'm sure. But very quickly, or at least in your initial reaction to the verdict, where did the prosecution not succeed? What were they not able to prove, and were there elements of their case or witnesses they brought to the stand that you did not think were ultimately effective in swaying the jury?
Well, the prosecution doesn't really get to pick its witnesses. The facts are the facts. I always commented from the beginning of the trial that each and every witness didn't seem to hurt the defense that much. So the prosecution brings forth the witnesses who saw and heard and observed and presented to the jury. I'm not sure the prosecution failed yet. They made some minor tactical errors. Certainly there were questions about Mr. Binger's arguments to the jury, which could be second-guessed. Fair enough, but at the end of the day, the facts were what was presented, and the jury found that there was a lacking of evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to prove it, and that's the basis of the verdict. I have great faith in jurors, and I think that they took their time. They were deliberate. He had 5 or 6 counts to deal with, 5 counts, I guess, at the end. And a lot of evidence and testimony to get through.
Michael, I want to draw your attention to the fact Kyle Rittenhouse was charged initially with 7 counts. 2 of those dropped, the possession of a dangerous weapon and also the charge over the emergency order violating the curfew. If those still were on the table against him, could that have made a difference? Could he have even gotten a little bit of jail time or some sort of repercussion if those were on the table? What is your sense?
A sense is maybe, but this is a homicide trial. So if those charges remained and he was convicted of the misdemeanors and he did a handful of days or a handful of months in jail, I'm not sure there would have been any greater satisfaction for the prosecution or those who felt that he should have been convicted of the homicides. This is a homicide trial. And honestly, I question the defense's motivation in seeking the dismissal of those misdemeanor charges, thinking that if the jury was going to compromise on some conviction, at least it ought to be a misdemeanor if I'm representing Mr. Rittenhouse, rather than one of these lesser included offenses. And for their thinking, all or nothing worked out. But I did have some concerns that the jury might compromise, and since there wasn't a misdemeanor charge to compromise on, there was a real risk that perhaps they convict on one of these lesser included.
Thank you very much for that perspective and that expertise. Interesting to hear that it was a bit of a gamble for the defense, but it has paid off. Kyle Rittenhouse, a free man, not guilty on all 5 of the ultimate counts that he faced. Michael Hart, a defense attorney with Hart Powell, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll be checking in with you over the time being. In the meantime,